The debris field showed up on long range sensors first, a slow-moving cloud of rock and wreckage drifting through the neutral border zone. Orvin had seen 100 of them. He was about to mark it routine and move on, when Fallen made a small sound from the analysis station. Not a word, just sound, the kind that meant something was wrong. Orvin crossed the bridge. The sensor screen was throwing error codes, red markers stacking up faster than the system could clear them. Fallen was running the scan again, manually this time, fingers moving quickly across the input panel. "What is it?" Orvin asked. "There is something inside the debris field," Fallen said, "or behind it." "Using it." Dressa came over from the command seat. She looked at the screen for a long moment. "A ship." "It reads like a ship," Fallen said. "But the mass displacement is I don't know what this number is. This can't be a single hull." Orvin looked at the readout. The figure meant nothing to him at first. Then he did the comparison in his head, set it against the Voreth heavy carrier behind them, the largest vessel in the patrol fleet. The number on the screen was larger, much larger. "Run it again," Dressa said. "I have run it 4 times, Fallen said quietly. The object was moving. That was the next thing they noticed. It was moving at a speed that made no sense for something of that size, cutting through the debris field without slowing, pushing chunks of rock aside like they weighed nothing, which to whatever was generating that mass shadow, they probably did. Then it cleared the debris field entirely and came into open space. The optical array on the forward hull of Dressa's ship swung to track it. Automatically, the image that came back onto the main screen made the bridge go quiet in a way that Orvin had never heard before. Not tense quiet, not combat quiet, something closer to the silence a person makes when they see something that does not fit inside any category they have. The vessel was dark. That was the first impression. Dark plating, almost no reflective surface, running lights so small against the total mass of the hull that they looked like distant stars. The forward section was wide and flat, angled downward at the nose, with weapons arrays arranged in rows that Orvin could count but did not want to. The midsection was thicker than the front, rising into a superstructure that had its own internal layers visible through open maintenance bays the size of small hangars. The rear was all engine, 4 main drives and a ring of secondaries, currently idle, still radiating heat from a long burn. Orvin's personal display put up an estimated length, 4.3 km. He read it twice. "Has anyone hailed them?" he asked. No one had. Dressa opened a channel across all standard frequencies. She gave her name, her fleet, her authority under council, patrol law. Her voice was steady. Orvin gave her credit for that. The response came back in less than 30 seconds. The signal was human encoded. Orvin had dealt with human signals before. Their communication systems had a particular rhythm to them, a slight delay pattern from the way they compressed data. He recognized it immediately. What he did not recognize was the identification code that followed. "UES Unbroken Will," said the voice on the channel. It had a woman's voice. Unhurried, professional. "Captain Sierra speaking. We received your hail. Good to meet you, Commander Dressa. We have been in transit for 11 days. Apologies for arriving through the debris field. It was the faster route." Dressa looked at Orvin. He looked back at her. Captain Sierra, Dressa said carefully. Can you confirm the class designation of your vessel? A short pause, then Titan class. She is the third of her line. Is there anything you need from us at this time? Orvan turned away from the channel and walked 3 steps toward the far side of the bridge. He needed a moment. He needed more than a moment. He had been a council diplomat for 22 years. He had attended the summit where humanity was formally accepted into the council as a protected emerging species. That had been 19 cycles ago. 19. He remembered the debate about whether they were advanced enough to be worth the administrative burden. He looked at the ship on the screen. Again, he came back to the channel. Captain, we were not informed of your patrol assignment in this sector. I can forward our orders if that helps. Sierra said. She sounded genuinely helpful, not defensive. We were rerouted about 6 days ago. There was an incident near the outer rim. I can include that in the report as well. Please do, Orvan said. The data packet arrived seconds later. Orvan opened it. Felon came to stand beside him and read over his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. At the back of the bridge, the priority channel began to flash. High Seat Murin calling from the capital. The mass sensor alert had reached the council home system. Someone was asking questions that Orvan did not yet have good answers to. He looked one more time at the unbroken will sitting in open space, patient, dark, enormous, and then he answered the channel. He was not sure what he was going to say. High Seat Murin spoke for 6 minutes. Without stopping, Orvan held the channel open and listened, and said very little. She wanted to know why a human warship of undisclosed class had appeared on the emergency mass sensor grid. She wanted to know who had authorized a vessel of this size to operate in the neutral border zone. She wanted a full report filed within 2 hours and a direct explanation from the Human Council representative before the next session. Orvan promised all of it and closed the channel. Then he stood for a moment and looked at the unbroken will through the forward viewport, not the screen, the actual viewport, and tried to understand what he was seeing. The ship had not moved. It was holding position 300 km off the fleet's port side, which was close enough to be clearly visible and far enough to be clearly deliberate. It was not crowding them. It was not posturing. It was simply there, the way a mountain is simply there. Dressa had used the time to run a full optical survey. She pulled the results onto the main display and walked Orvan and Fallen through them without commentary at first, letting the images speak. The armor plating on the forward hull was layered, not a single composite but alternating materials, each layer a different density. Felon said it looked like the design was meant to defeat multiple different weapon types simultaneously, rather than optimizing against one threat. He said it the way someone says something they find academically interesting and personally disturbing at the same time. The weapons arrays were counted and sorted by type. Forward-facing primary guns 8, they were long-barreled. Fixed mount, the kind built for punching through hardened targets at range. Secondary batteries along the mid-hull. 31 point defense clusters. Fallen stopped counting at 60 and noted the number was approximate. There was also something under the forward hull that did not match any weapons profile in the Council database. Dressa marked it with A question tag and moved on. The engine section was the part that kept the fleet gunner focused on. He had been quiet through most of the survey, but he spoke up when the aft imagery came on screen. He said the secondary drive ring was positioned wrong for a vessel this size. Too far inward, too close to the primary drives. Someone asked him what that meant. He said it meant the secondaries were not for acceleration, they were for turning, fast turning, for a ship 4 km long. No one had a response to that. Dresser requested a second hail to the unbroken will. Sierra answered quickly. The channel quality was excellent, clear audio, no compression artifacts, which meant their communication array was also well above what the council expected from a human vessel. Dresser asked about the rerouting that Sierra had mentioned. She asked it carefully, framing it as a routine administrative question. Sierra explained without hesitation. 6 days ago, the Unbroken Will had picked up a distress ping from a Lithari survey vessel called the Vel Oreth, not the place name, the ship name, which had been caught in a debris collapse near the outer rim marker. The survey ship had lost maneuvering power and was taking minor hull damage from drifting fragments. The Unbroken Will had diverted, cleared the debris field, restored the ship's position, and provided a repair team for 4 hours before the Lethari crew confirmed they could make it to the nearest station unassisted. Orvin felt something shift in his chest. The Vel Oreth was a Lethari vessel. His people he had not heard anything about. A distress call. He pulled the registry. The Vel Oreth was a 6-person scientific survey crew operating under a council exploration license. He found a log entry marked 2 days ago, crew safe, minor damage en route to station. The entry had not flagged as urgent because the crew was already safe by the time the report reached anyone. He asked Sierra when this happened. She said 10 days ago, before they rerouted, before the 11-day transit. The Unbroken would have handled it on the way. Felon did the math out loud without thinking. He said that the Unbroken would have performed a search and rescue operation for a foreign vessel, deployed a repair team, waited for confirmation of safety, and then completed an 11-day transit to reach this sector, all within time frame that suggested it had not slowed down at any point. Dresser asked what was used to clear the debris field around the survey ship. Sierra answered, the forward point. Defense grid, standard dispersal pattern. Dresser looked at the 60-plus point defense clusters marked on her survey display and said nothing. She closed the channel briefly and turned to the room. Her question was simple. What do we tell High Seat Murin? Orvin thought about it. The honest answer was that a human warship the size of a small geographic feature had appeared in the border zone, performed an unrequested rescue of a council vessel, and was now sitting politely in formation waiting to begin its assigned patrol, and no one in the council had known it existed until 40 minutes ago. He thought about how to make that sound less alarming. He could not find a way. Tell her the truth, he said, and tell her we are requesting a full tour of the vessel, because if there are more of these, we need to understand what we are looking at. Dresser nodded and opened the channel to the Unbroken Will again. Sierra agreed to the tour without any discussion or delay. She sent shuttle docking clearance before Dresser finished the request. Bay 7 forward. Midsection. Approach vector already calculated and transmitted. The efficiency of it was, somehow another, unsettling thing to add to the list. Orvan Dressa and Felon took the shuttle. Across, Kid asked to come. Dressa almost said no, then decided a weapons officer's perspective might be useful. He came. The approach to the Unbroken will took longer than expected, not because of distance but because of scale. The ship did not seem to get bigger as they got closer the way a normal vessel did. It was already so large that the shuttle's proximity sensors had to recalibrate twice before they locked onto the correct docking bay entrance. The bay doors were open. They were large enough to accept a Voreth heavy shuttle with clearance on all sides. They landed. The landing bay was not full. There were two smaller craft inside, human military shuttles, each roughly the size of a Voreth patrol cutter, and a row of maintenance equipment along the firewall. An engineer in a gray work suit looked up from a panel, nodded at it arriving shuttle, and went back to work. Sierra was waiting at the bay exit. She was shorter than Orvan expected, which was a strange thing to notice given everything, but it was the first thing he noticed. She wore the dark uniform of a human fleet officer with minimal decoration, a rank insignia on the collar and a small ship patch on the left arm. She shook hands with each of them. The gesture was a human custom. She did it naturally, and none of them fumbled it badly. She asked if they wanted to eat before the tour. The crew mess was nearby, and the cook had made something she described as a very good bean dish. They declined. She nodded and led them out. The corridors of the Unbroken Will were wide enough that 4 people could walk side by side with room left over. The ceiling was high. Every junction was clearly marked with both human text and a secondary symbol system that fell and identified as the Council Standard Navigational Notation. Added, Sierra explained when the ship was assigned to joint patrol duty. The crew had learned the symbols in the first month. They passed crew members at regular intervals. Some nodded to Sierra, some glanced at the visitors with uncomplicated curiosity. None of them stopped working. The ship was not at alert status. It was simply operating. Sierra took them to the engineering section first. She said it was usually what people wanted to see. Chief Engineer Aldous met them at the entrance to the primary drive bay. Broad-shouldered man with grease on his forearm who shook hands the same way Sierra did, and immediately began explaining the drive system with the enthusiasm of someone who had waited a long time for an audience. The drive bay was enormous. 4 levels of catwalks surrounded the main reaction chamber. The heat was present but controlled. The sound was a low, stable hum that Orvan felt more in his chest than heard with his ears. Aldous explained what the drive could do. He used numbers and then, noticing the expressions around him, translated them into comparisons. He said the Unbroken Will could cross this sector in 11 days, running at 60% capacity at full burn, which they used rarely and only emergencies. The transit time dropped significantly. He said significantly, with a specific number attached. Fallen made a small sound again. Draxa asked about the secondary drive ring. She had been thinking about Ket's comment since the survey. Aldous lit up. He said the secondary ring was his favorite part of the ship. He explained the positioning inset close to the primary drive, so the torque translated directly into the hulls. Center mass during a turn, he said the unbroken wheel could come to a full lateral reposition in a distance that would surprise most captains who had not seen it. He paused and added that the first time Sarah had done it at full speed in a training exercise, half the crew had been caught off guard. Sarah said from the doorway, "That was an exaggeration." Aldous said it was not an exaggeration. They moved on to the weapons deck. Duty officer named Rand gave the overview. Calm, factual, thorough, he pulled up the firing range data for the primary gun array. Orvin looked at the numbers. He did not ask follow-up questions. The medical bay was the part that surprised Orvin most. It was large, not as large as engineering, but larger than he expected, fully staffed with 3 doctors on the current shift. The equipment was advanced, some of it unfamiliar. The chief medic, a young woman named Dissat, not Dresser Dissat, explained that the ship carried full trauma surgical capability and a small research lab focused on treating injuries in species outside the standard Human Biology Index. Orvin asked why a warship needed cross-species medical research. Dissat looked at him the way a person looks at a question that seems obvious to them, she said, because sometimes we rescue people who are not human. Orvin thought about the Vel Oreth. He thought about what it said about species that builds a warship and then puts a cross-species trauma lab inside it. He did not say anything. He followed Sierra to the next section. Felon asked his question near the end of the tour in a long corridor that connected the midsection to the forward observation deck. He had been holding it for a while. Orvin could tell by the way he kept almost starting a sentence and then stopping. He asked Sierra how long the Titan class program had been running. Sierra thought for a moment, not the pause of someone being careful with sensitive information, but the pause of someone doing an honest mental calculation. She said the design phase started about 34 years ago. The first hull was laid down 28 years ago. The first Titan class vessel, the UES Endurance, launched 21 years ago. Felon said, 21 years ago. Sierra said, yes. Was there a problem with the timeline? Felon looked at Orvin. Orvin understood the look. 21 years ago, humanity had been classified by the Council as a Category 3 emerging civilization. They had not yet made formal first contact with any galactic species. The Council had a survey team observing their system from a safe distance and filing quarterly reports about their development pace. The quarterly report from that period. Orvin had read some of them once, years later, out of historical curiosity. Described humanity as a species showing early signs of long-range spaceflight ambition, but unlikely to achieve practical interstellar capability within the next century. In that same year, humans had been 2 years away from launching the first Titan-class warship. Orvin did not explain this to Sierra. He was not sure how to explain it without it sounding insulting or alarming or both. The observation deck was at the forward point of the ship, behind the main gun array housing. The viewport curved across the full front face of the room, a wide, clear sweep of space. The patrol fleet was visible to the port side, small and orderly in the distance. The debris field they had come through was further beyond, a gray smear against the star field. A young crew member was at the viewport, When they arrived, off-duty by the look of the casual clothes, sitting with a notebook and drawing something, she stood up quickly when she saw Sierra. Sierra told her to sit down. They were just passing through. The crew member sat down and went back to her drawing. Orvin looked at her for a moment. She was drawing the debris field, not as a threat assessment or a navigation hazard, just drawing it the way it looked against the stars because she found it interesting. He thought about what kind of culture produces that, a warship crewed by people who sketch debris fields in notebooks during their off hours. He thought it probably said something important, but he was not sure yet what it was. Draxa had moved to the far end of the viewport and was looking at something specific. Orvin went to join her. She was looking at the secondary hull structure below the main body, a long, reinforced section running most of the ship's length, too thick to be purely structural. She asked Sierra what it was. Sierra said it was the primary supply and logistics corridor. It ran the length of the ship and connected all major sections. It could also function as an independent sealed environment if the main hull was breached in multiple locations simultaneously. Dressa asked what it carried. Sierra listed food production, actual food production the ship had, growing systems, fuel reserve tanks, medical overflow capacity, a small machine shop capable of fabricating replacement parts for most ship systems, and a section they had informally designated as the quiet zone, which was just a low-light room with chairs and plants where crew could go when they needed to not be around the noise of the ship for a while. Ket, who had been almost entirely silent for the entire tour, said, "You have plants on a warship?" Sierra said, "Yes, people live on the ship. For 14-month deployments, plants help." Ket looked like he was recalculating something fundamental about his assumptions. On the way back to the shuttle bay, they passed through a crew common area. Crew members from several different human national backgrounds were at a table together, 4 of them, an argument in progress over something that resolved into laughter before Orvan could identify the topic. A pair of engineers in the corner were running calculations on a shared screen and talking quickly, interrupting each other constantly in the collaborative style that Orvan had noticed humans defaulted to when they were solving something. He stopped walking for a moment. He was trying to understand the texture of this ship, not its weapons or its engines. Those were knowable, classifiable, countable. He was trying to understand what it said about humanity, that they built a vessel this powerful and then filled it with notebooks and plants and off-shift arguments and a room specifically designated for people who needed quiet. Dressa came back and stood beside him. She had noticed him stopping. "What are you thinking?" she asked low enough that only he could hear. "I am thinking," Orvin said, "that we have spent 19 cycles studying humanity from a category framework, and the framework was completely wrong." Dressa looked around the common area. Crew member across the room caught her eye and gave a small, friendly nod. She did not respond, but she nodded back. The private session happened in the small conference room aboard Dressa's command ship 3 hours after they returned from the Unbroken Will. Dressa, Orvan, Fallen and Ket. The door sealed. "No external recording." Dressa put the question on the table immediately. Sierra had said the Unbroken Will was the 3rd Titan-class vessel in service Third, that meant there were at least 2 others no one in this room knew. Where they were, no one in the entire Council Fleet Registry had any record of them. Dressa had checked on the shuttle ride back. She had run the search 4 different ways using 4 different access levels. Nothing. Fallen said he had pulled every human treaty disclosure filed since their council admission. Military capacity declarations were required at the time of membership, with updates filed every 5 cycles. The human submission listed fleet vessels by category: patrol class, carrier class, heavy cruiser class, with numbers that the council had reviewed and accepted. There was no Titan class category. There was no vessel type matching the unbroken wills displacement profile. Orvan asked if that meant the humans had lied in their disclosure. Felon said he did not think so. He had gone back and read the original document carefully. The human submission listed categories that the council had asked about. The council had used a standard template drafted 40 years ago for emerging civilizations applying for membership. The template did not include a category for vessel above heavy cruiser class because at the time the template was written, no emerging civilization had ever built one. Humanity had simply filled in the categories asked and left out everything that did not fit the form. There was a long silence. Ket said they did not hide it. We did not ask. No one corrected him because he was right. Orvan opened a channel to the human council representative, Ambassador Torvin. He reached him on the second attempt. Torvin was apparently in an administrative meeting and explained the situation plainly. He asked Torvin to confirm the Titan class program and the number of vessels currently in service. Torvin confirmed it without hesitation. He said there were currently 5 Titan class vessels in active service. A 6th was in final construction and expected to launch within the year. Dressa wrote the number down. Even though the channel was recorded, she needed to do something physical with her hands. Orvan asked if the council had been informed of the Titan class program through official channels. Torvin thought about it. He said the program appeared in every annual defense budget published by the Earth government, which was a public document. He said it had also been mentioned in a technical briefing offered to all council members 4 years ago, though he acknowledged the briefing had low attendance. He seemed genuinely confused by the nature of the question. He asked if there had been a communication failure somewhere. Orvan said they would follow up. He closed the channel. Ket asked what would happen if the Joint Fleet engaged the Unbroken. Right now, nobody wanted to answer it. Felon answered it anyway. He said he had been doing the numbers since the optical survey. The Unbroken Will's primary gun array alone could engage the entire patrol fleet simultaneously. Its point defense grid would neutralize most incoming fire before impact. Its armor profile was designed to handle sustained bombardment from capital class weapons. Its speed and turn capability meant it could dictate the range and angle of any engagement. He said he was not accounting for any capabilities they had not directly observed, of which there were likely several. He said in a direct engagement the outcome is not close. Ket nodded like a man confirming a suspicion he had hoped was wrong. Dressa asked what 5 of these vessels meant for the overall balance of force in council space. Orven said he needed to think carefully about how he was going to write that part of the report to High Seat Murin, because the honest answer was that 5 Titan-class vessels operating together represented a military capacity that most Council member species could not match individually, and humanity had built them quietly over 2 decades without the Council paying attention, not because they were hiding anything, but because they were simply doing what humans did, which was build things and not always think to announce it. Felon said, we assessed them as Category 3 and stopped watching. Orven said, yes. Felon said, what category are they now? Orven had been a diplomat for 22 years. He was good at framing things carefully. But he sat in that small conference room and found that he did not have a category for what humanity was now. Not because they were dangerous, though they clearly could be, but because they had built a ship with a quiet room and cross-species medical research and crew members who drew debris fields and notebooks, and then armed that ship with enough firepower to reshape a sector, and then sent it out to rescue survey ships and patrol trade lanes on behalf of a council that had not known to be impressed. He said, I think we need a new template. The channel from High Seat Murin lit up again. She had received Felon's preliminary report. She was asking for immediate clarification on the vessel count. Orven straightened his jacket, opened the channel, and started explaining. The emergency session of the Galactic Council opened 14 hours after the Unbroken will made contact with the patrol fleet. Representatives from 11 member species attended in person. 6 more connected remotely. It was the largest emergency gathering in 3 cycles, and the topic on the formal record was listed as undisclosed. Military capacity, human member species. Ambassador Torvin sat at the human delegation table alone. He had no staff. With him, he had a cup of something warm and a single data tablet. He looked less alarmed than almost everyone else in the room, which was itself alarming to several of the people watching him. High Seat Murin opened the session by presenting the facts as Orven had reported them. 5 Titan-class vessels in service, 6 under construction, each vessel over 4 km in length, a weapons and armor profile that exceeded any comparable class operated by any council member. Program running for over 2 decades. Funded publicly, never formally disclosed to the council because the council's membership template had not included the relevant category. She asked Torvin for a response. Torvin said, yes, all of that is accurate. She asked why the council had not been told. Torvin said he understood the concern. He said the Titan-class program appeared in every public budget document the Earth government had issued for 27 years. The design specifications had been published in human technical journals. The launch of the first vessel, the UES Endurance, had generated significant public attention on Earth and had been mentioned in a routine cultural update filed with the council at the time of the launch. He pulled the filing number from his tablet and read it aloud for the record. One of the council archivists confirmed the filing existed. There was a very uncomfortable silence. The representative from the Vorath Alliance, a senior officer named Brell, said that the existence of a filing was not the same as a disclosure. He said a species joining the council had a responsibility to make its Military capacity clear, not bury it in. Cultural updates. Torvin said he took the point. He said he would recommend that the Earth government file a formal addendum to the original disclosure document covering the Titan-class program in full. He said it would take about 2 weeks to compile the technical specifications into Council standard format. He asked if that was acceptable. Brell said the issue was not the paperwork. Torrance said, then what is the issue? Brell said, the issue is that you have 5 vessels of this class and we did not know. Torrance said, and are those vessels doing something harmful? Nobody answered immediately. Felon, sitting in the observer section with Dressa and Orvan, watched the room. He had his notes on his lap, but he was not looking at them. Torrance said, the Unbroken Will is currently on patrol in the neutral border zone. In the last 12 hours it has intercepted a raider convoy that had been active in that sector for 2 years, disabled all 6 vessels without destroying them, and transmitted the prisoner manifest and ship coordinates to Commander Dressa for processing. He pulled up the transmission on his tablet. He said this was what the Titan class vessels did. They patrolled, they rescued people, they stopped raiders, they carried cross-species medical teams and fabrication workshops and food systems because their crews lived aboard for over a year at a time. And humans believed that people who lived somewhere deserved to actually live there, not just survive there. He set the tablet down. He said, we built big ships because space is dangerous and we take that seriously. We put good things inside those ships because we take our crews seriously. We did not announce it loudly because it did not occur to us that anyone was waiting for the announcement. That is the full explanation. I am sorry it took this long to say clearly. High Seat Murin looked at him for a long moment, then she looked at Orvan. Orvan thought about the young crew member drawing the debris field. He thought about Dis and her cross-species trauma lab. He thought about the quiet room. He stood. He said, I want to put something on record. The patrol fleet was protected in that sector by the Unbroken Will before we even knew it was there. It rescued one of my people's vessels before we filed a single request. It has asked for nothing in return. I think the question before this council is not what to do about humanity's military capacity. I think the question is what it says about us, that we are frightened of it. The room did not erupt. It went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when someone has said something that cannot be easily argued with. High Seat Murin called a recess. In the corridor outside, Orvan's personal comm received a short message from the Unbroken Will, Sira sending an update. The raider prisoners had been transferred successfully.